Post ನೀವು accept ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. Good evening all. From Team UKSL, a warm welcome to all the participants. Today is our 19th webinar in a webinar series, and we are coming with a interesting topic on basics of GST. Mr. Siddeshwar Yelamali will be educating us on the GST area. Before we hand it over to him, I request my fellow trustee, Mr. Sanjeev Patwari, to introduce Mr. Siddeshwar Yelamali.
Thanks, Prakash. Welcome, Siddeshwar sir. ಸೊ ಸಿದ್ದೇಶ್ವರ್ ಯಲಮಳಿ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮ ಟ್ರಸ್ಟಿಗೆ ಏನು ಹೊಸದಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಅವರು ಗಿರೀಶ್ ಯಲಮಳಿ ಅವರ ಬ್ರದರ್, ಹಂಗಾಗಿ ಅವ್ರು ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಅವರ. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ನಾನ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಒಂದ್ 5 ನಿಮಿಷ, ಬಹಳ ಏನ್ ತಗೊಳುದಿಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದ್ 5 ನಿಮಿಷ ಕ್ವಿಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಇಂಟ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. So basically, Siddeshwar Yelamali sir is basically a CA by profession, and he has done his BCom LLB, and he's the partner in direct taxes at Singhvi Dev and Any LLP Chartered Accountants Bangalore. They are basically practicing indirect tax for the past 20 years, specializing mainly on the GST, and he is currently serving as the National Treasurer of All India Federation of Tax Practitioners, and he was the National Joint Secretary of AIFTP South Zone for 2025 and 2021. And apart from that, right, he is the faculty, he co-authored, and he's written many of the books. I'll just give a glimpse of what he has co-authored and what he is the faculty at some of the institutes, right? He is a part of the GST faculty at Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and also presented papers in the certification course conducted by the ICAI. And he is also the faculty at the Fiscal Policy Institute of the state of Karnataka, involved in training the officers of Commercial Taxes Department and officers of PSU, and also the faculty at NACIR. And he has also co-authored a lot of books and authored a lot of articles also. And he has co-authored a book on search, seizure, prosecution, and arrest under the tax and allied laws, GST, related by and published by Taxman in association with AIFTP. And he has also published, he authors articles on GST on journal published by AIFTP, and he also authored a book on Q&A on input tax credit published by the Federation of Karnataka Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And he authored, and he's also the co-author of GST Act Handbook of Jurisprudence, a compilation of Supreme Court and High Court GST judgments published by BCIC. And there is one more, last but not the least, he is the co-author of Apex Court and High Court GST Case Law Essentials for Tax Professionals, again published by Taxman in association with AIFTP. This is just I just cut short his introduction, so we would like to hear more from him directly. Thanks once again, sir. We can get started.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you very much. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Prakash sir, for inviting me to give a brief introduction about GST, and thank you, Sanjeev sir, for your kind words and introduction. Without taking much of the time, I'll just start with the presentation. I hope the slides are visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Before we start into getting into GST, if you can recall, we had many of the taxes which were there, which businessmen or manufacturer had to comply. They were central excise for manufacturers who had to pay excise duty and even VAT. Then for traders, it was liable to sales tax earlier. Then most of the states moved to value-added tax. Then for service providers, there was service tax. if the manufacturer was provider of service as well as manufacturing or trading and services, they had to comply with service tax as well as excise and VAT. Then if you had interstate movement of goods, you are liable to central sales tax. Then if any goods were coming from one state into the state of Karnataka, it was liable to entry tax. You had to comply with entry tax. In the state of Maharashtra, octroi. Then hotel industries had a luxury tax. Then there was entertainment tax. So a businessman who are doing businesses had to comply with so many laws and also file returns. There is various due dates. So for manufacturer, excise returns. If he has services, also service tax returns, payment of taxes, VAT returns, and with so many laws in place, you would have so many tax authority visiting the business premise for verification of the taxes. It is the job of the tax authorities to verify the compliances, whether the books of accounts are right or wrong, and if there is any short payment of tax, they would issue notices. So, considering that there were so many compliances which had to be done and so many tax laws which had to be complied by the SSEs, the government came with the concept called as goods and services tax, where all these taxes were subsumed into goods and services tax. It got implemented in July 2017, right? So, most of these taxes were subsumed into GST, except that alcohol for human consumption, petrol, HSD, natural gas is not leviable to GST. Stamp duty is not leviable to GST currently. And for these products and even aviation turbine fuel, these are not under GST currently. The reason for this is that states have not agreed for that, so it may take time. But industry has been pushing to subsume even the petroleum products and petrol under GST. The reason being that if these also come into GST net, the business manufacturers and other traders would be eligible to take input tax credit and offset that with the output tax which is there unless they bring in some restrictions. So considering all these things as a background, I will start with the basics of GST. If you see at the word goods which is defined, you will feel that it is a very simple definition. Goods means every kind of movable property other than money and securities. Securities in the sense these are your shares, debentures, and actionable claim include and growing crops. These are the things which are not there as goods, but goods means anything other than which are movable property. And service is a very simpler definition. If you see that means anything other than goods, money and securities, but includes the activities relating to use of money. What does this mean that includes activities relating to use of money? Now, when the banker issues you a foreign exchange, he will charge you commission. So those activities which are there for relating to money or exchange of currency and other things, those are falling within the net of services. And if you see goods meaning, it includes actionable claim. Actionable claim classic example is your lottery tickets. It has its own legacy of taxation. We'll not get into that. But recently you would have heard about the big judgment which came on online money games, whether it is taxable. You would have heard the Gamescraft case, which has gone up to Supreme Court, and there the Supreme Court upheld its levy of GST and valuation. It's a big story which went up to the Supreme Court where they challenged on the levy as well as valuation processes. Now the judgment has come. Now the industry again has gone and filed a petition asking for a review of the judgment which has been given. Now, the definition of goods and services, though it appears very simple, I would like to just people teams who are in the may type whether food in a restaurant is goods or services, because it is in the form which it comes to you, which is served on the table. Generally, what happened in VAT and service tax, it was leviable to both. So if you go by the mere definition of goods, okay, it is a movable property, then we'll feel that it is liable, it is considered as goods. But what happens under GST is there is a definition of supply under section 7, and there is a meaning provided that certain activities which appear in schedule 2 of the GST Act, there they have defined that certain activities which may appear as goods, they will classify it as services, and if it is services, it might be classifiable as goods also. So if you go to schedule 2, now supply of food at restaurant will fall as services and liable to goods and service tax under the classification as services. There is a separate HSN code for that, which will be classifiable for you under notification 11 of 2017. And software, if you hear the meaning of software, development of software customization or any other things which you do is service. Fine. So whether it is goods or services was a matter of debate under the erstwhile VAT and service tax. It went up to Supreme Court in the case of Tata Consultancy Services because software is not visible, right? So the question arises, if it is not visible and it is intangible, it is not leviable to VAT was the case which went up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that though it is intangible, it is capable of being stored, transmitted, and transferred, and it has all the attributes of a goods, and it is goods and liable to VAT also. There were interplay of levy of tax under erstwhile law as software as goods as well as services, but there was a mechanism to determine how much what is liable to VAT and what is liable to services. So because there were so much of what you say litigation on this aspect, when the GST law was formulated, under Schedule 2, they made a mention that it will be liable to GST as services, that is for customization, development, and programming and stuff. And even temporary transfer. What is temporary transfer? Most of us use this Microsoft licenses, and we use various licenses in our day-to-day work, right? So these licenses are not a permanent transfer, which all these software vendors give us, right? They give us a right to use. So right to use also is a service. Now you'll have a classic dichotomy, or it raises a question like if I do a permanent transfer of software, which has all the copyrights, right? I will be selling the whole software which has all the copyrights and trademarks and things, right? So now if you go as determining whether it is service or goods, it will have its own analysis. Now, if you say goods, which I've mentioned in the first point as movable property, now, when I transfer the software, say software which is developed by me for what you say example Microsoft software itself, if that is permanently transferred to another person, then it takes the character of goods. And if you go to notification 1, now which is 9 of 2025, there will find a classification as permanent transfer of intangible property is goods. And when you go to notification 11 of 2017 for services, there also you'll find this permanent or temporary transfer of intangible property is service also. So there will be parallel. So though this appears to be very simple, classification of goods or services becomes critical. So apart from determining goods and services, you'll have to look into notifications also of classification of goods and services. But you may note one point here, that just because a particular goods or services is getting classified as goods or services in notification, that won't determine whether it is goods or services. first you'll have to get down into determining first whether that particular supply is goods or services. So after determining whether it is goods or services, you need to get into determining the rate of tax. Now, supply definition under the goods and services tax is a very vast definition. If you look at that supply definition, it includes all form of supply of goods or services of both, such as sale, transfer. Note down the word barter. Barter is a very important concept which is brought into GST. Under the erstwhile VAT law, if there was no consideration provided in case of any transfer of goods, it was not liable to VAT. But now, even if I say exchange laptop with another manufacturer for any goods, that both the barter will be liable to GST. Valuation mechanism will have to be taken care separately. So now a businessman who exchange goods as a way of barter will be leviable to GST. So we have to take care in such transactions and determine whether it is liable to GST made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Now, next leg of the supply, activities or transactions by a person to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash or deferred payment or other valuable consideration. Before I get into this, I'll just take you back towards the erstwhile law. There was a lot of litigation where there are various clubs where individuals become members. So there was a dispute arising saying that a person who becomes a member of a club can't service to its own member or to a person when you serve food can't be said as sale of food or providing services to the member of a club. So again, right from the day one, this went into dispute all the way up to the Supreme Court. Then the Calcutta High Court judgment came saying that it can't be liable to VAT or service tax. And this judgment came during the GST law. So you can imagine the taxation law where any disputes go up to Supreme Court, it takes a lot of time for it to get settled. So the moment this judgment came, the uh, amendment was made in the act to say that any services or goods which are their activities or transactions between its member or the club will be liable to tax. And this, what they did is they did a retrospective amendment. So they went on to do a retrospective amendment to levy tax on this. So now people are going to dispute on saying that whether a retrospective amendment, see what happened, the judgment came very late in the GST era, say after the judgment came, where many of the clubs had taken a position that it is not liable to goods and services tax. Now, after the judgment comes, you are going to demand tax retrospectively from July 2017 becomes a big battle and many will challenge this. Next, import of service for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of businesses. Even this they are bought into levy as a GST. Then activities specified in Schedule 1. What is the Schedule 1 for our understanding? I'll give an example where I have a head office in Karnataka and a branch in another state. So when I make a supply from head office to branch, I will not collect any money from that particular transaction, right? But under GST, if a supply is made of goods from one state to other state, even without consideration, it is liable to GST. So there are many other activities which are mentioned under GST under the schedule 1. I'll not get into those things. Just keep an eye on these specific activities which are liable to GST even when made without consideration. Uh, so having delved into what is meaning of goods, what is meaning of services, and what is a wider definition of supply, because supply now is a more wider definition compared to what was there in the erstwhile law, we have to keep our eyes open on this particular thing. And at the same time, whether construction of residential apartments and all, whether it will fall under goods or services, this was leviable to service tax as well as VAT in the erstwhile law. So in the GST, to get away with all these confusions, whether it is goods or services, under Schedule 2, they have classified this as a service for the limited purposes so that there will not be any further dispute. Certain activities which will be treated as goods or services. So I gave you certain examples like uh, restaurant services are liable to services. Software, if it is development or customization software, it is services. Permanent transfer of intellectual property, it will be treated as goods. Construction activity, it will be treated as services. There are many other activities which are there. These are the few classic examples which I would like to share with you. Then there is another class of transactions which are treated neither as goods or services, which are listed in Schedule 3 of the Central Goods and Services Tax Act. See, what happens is the Central Goods and Services Tax Act and the State Goods and Services Tax Act are same. They have divided those into two acts only for the purposes of levy and collection of taxes, because there has to be share of taxes between the center and government. So whatever I am telling under Central Goods and Services Tax Act equally applies under the state tax also. Now, what are the activities or transactions which are not liable to GST under Schedule 3? Employee services to the employer. So employees who are paid salary by the
ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಸರ್
employer, that is not liable to GST. Now,
ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಸರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಯಾರಿಗೋ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸೈಡ್.
another one is funeral services. They have excluded
Okay.
that from GST. Then when you sell a land, purchase and sale of land, plain land, that is not considered as goods or services and kept outside the ambit of GST. The next one is building which is already completed and occupancy certificate is received, or existing building which is there. If you make a sale of that, that also is not liable to GST. So these are some of the transactions which I thought should be shared with you, whether it is liable to GST or not. These are the certain transactions. There are many other transactions which are there, which may not require our attention. Registrations. This is a very critical aspect when a registration is required by a person doing a business. So every person who is supplying goods or services or both, if the aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakhs in a financial year and rupees 10 lakhs in the states of Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, these are special category in a financial year. So if your turnover is below this, you need not register under the Goods and Services Tax Act. So, but you have to keep monitoring. And this turnover should be considered on a all India basis. Suppose you have a PAN of a partnership firm. If you are doing business in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, this 20 lakhs turnover will have to be determined across India and just not one state. If your turnover exceeds the threshold limit, then you are mandatorily required to take registration. So what is turnover to be included in your aggregate turnover? All your taxable supplies, interstate supplies, exports. Though exports are not liable to tax, it is zero rated. You will have to consider even that turnover for determining the 20 lakhs threshold limit. And even exempted supplies. If you go to GST notification 2 of 2017 and for services 12 of 2017, there are list of goods or services which are not liable to tax. So 20 lakhs turnover, if you have to determine, it is not only taxable supplies, your export turnover and exempted turnover also you will have to determine to check whether you fall within the threshold limit. So you have to be very careful and keep a track if you are not registered. And just because you are not registered, sorry, don't be under the think that the nothing will be verified, because as and when you file your income tax return for your information, there is a uh, act, both the GST Act as well as the Income Tax Act provides for sharing of information between the tax officials, between GST as well as the income tax. The moment you file your income tax return, and there they will be keeping a monitoring how much you have disclosed your income tax, right? If it is salary, not a problem, but there will be income from business or profession and other things. So if those things are there, I would like to bring to your attention that the data analytics team of the center is too good, and they are far ahead even beyond the information technology companies. The data analytics is very good at the center. They are gathering information based on what is available in the domain, and their team is too good, and they are far ahead of even the major industries across India. So keep a track of that, and if you are required to be registered, please register and ensure that you pay the appropriate taxes. I am not trying to scare you, but the intelligence is too good, and the back-end work which they do, and the system processed information which is shared to them is too good, and they have a very good database available with them. So who are the persons not liable to GST? If I'm exclusively engaged in supply of goods or services which are not liable to tax under GST. So if I'm doing only supply of exempted goods or services, and even if my threshold limit exceeds that 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs as the case may be, I'm not required to take registration. An agriculturist to the extent of produce, interstate supply, these are some of the things. Person engaged in supply of goods or services which are liable to charge under reverse charge mechanism. For example, advocates, if they are only into legal services, they are not liable to register under GST. And this is not applicable for supply of metal scraps. There's a specific mention that you can't get away with these things. Casual taxable person is a person who doesn't, who does business on a casual basis and not regular. They are not liable to, they are notified to be registered. Persons making interstate supplies of notified handicrafts, only specified items are there which are not liable for registration. Then supply of services through e-commerce will be exempt from registration if you are below the threshold limit, but this exemption is not applicable to services of transportation of passengers by road taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, or motorcycle, accommodation in hotels, guest house. So keep your eyes open. If you are falling under this particular category of businesses, you will be liable for registration, though there is a relaxation for supply of services through e-commerce operators. I think slide movement. Is it hanging? Okay, sorry. So persons not liable for registration, there is a specific exemption for persons who are exclusively engaged in supply of goods. If you recall my previous slide, I had made a mention that 20 lakhs is the threshold limit. But there is one relaxation, that persons who are exclusively engaged in supply of goods and the turnover does not exceed 40 lakhs, registration is not required. But there's an exception to this. If you are required to make compulsory registration under GST Act, there is a section 24 which is providing for that. Uh, you are required to make mandatory registration. Specified persons are there. Then I don't know what is the reason where GST and even the erstwhile law, persons engaged in making supply of ice creams, they are not covered under this notification. They'll fall again under 20 lakh slab only. Sin products of pan masala, tobacco, they are not covered under this 40 lakh threshold limit. persons engaged in intrastate supplies in the states of Arunachal Pradesh will not get into that. And in case a person is voluntarily registered under GST, then there is no question that they can take a cover of this 40 lakhs exemption for not registration. If you are voluntarily registered, then you have no recourse to this. How do I determine once I determine whether a particular supply is goods or services, then I have to go and check the rates of tax applicable, right? So GST notification 1 of 2017 now superseded by 9 of 2025. If you recall the year in 2025, there are a lot of news across India saying there are a lot of rate rationalize has happened across various products. So that current notification for goods is 9 of 2025. These are the rates of tax. 2.5 goods are listed in Schedule 1. The list of goods are lot, so you'll have to check into that and see in which category your goods falls for 5% or 9% is Schedule 2, 20% is Schedule 3. Now, earlier, if you recall, there was something called as cess which was applicable. Now that cess has got removed and everything will fall under 20% slab, which is equal to 40% taxes. Earlier, when you had to procure motor vehicles, it was liable to cess and GST. Now they have removed that compensation cess and bought everything into 20% slab, 20 plus 20, which is 40%. Then 1.5 goods listed in Schedule 4. I'm just making a classification mentioned to you where this schedule can be referred, because the list of goods are humongous in the rate notification, which will not be able to go through in this 45 minutes of seminar. So I'm just giving you a heads up of where the goods are classified. And if there is some uh, what you say confusion on the classification, because if you see in the CGST notification, the HSN mentions are only 4 digit or 6 digit. If there is some classification issue which we are unable to resolve, then we have to go back to the Customs Tariff Act and see and interpret based on that. If you see the notification, it says that if there are any issues in the classification, you will have to go to the Customs Tariff Act and then determine whether the goods are classifiable under 2.5, 9%, 20%, etc. And goods which are exempted, now it is listed in notification 10 of 2025. The list of goods are mentioned there. And services are listed in notification 11 of 2017. In my previous discussion, I made a mention that permanent transfer of intellectual property is appearing in notification 9 of 2025 also, and notification 11 of 2017 for services also. This typical issue will come especially if you are making any permanent transfer of intellectual property cross border. Otherwise, if it is only domestic transaction, if it is a permanent transfer of intellectual property, it's a straight case, then it will be liable to as goods. Then go to notification of goods and determine the applicable rate of tax. Similarly, for services, the exemption notification is provided under notification 12 of 2017. All the business persons, please be careful who are registered under GST. If there are certain transactions which are liable to reverse charge mechanism, the person supplier will not be liable to pay tax. The person receiving the goods or services will be liable to uh, tax under reverse charge mechanism. And if I am importing any services from outside India, a classic example is most of us download softwares, right, from a person outside India. Then in such case, if I am registered in India and if I am importing certain services, then I will be liable to pay tax. And if I am eligible for input tax credit, I can claim that and pay offset with my output tax. Some of the goods which are liable under reverse charge mechanism, cashew nuts supplied by agriculturist and received by a person registered, the registered person is liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Tobacco leaves, similarly, silk and raw cotton, used vehicle sold by a person who is not used vehicle, a person registered under GST, he'll have to pay. And metal scrap, which they bought it a couple of years back, unregistered person selling it to a registered person, the person supplying who is unregistered, then the recipient is liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Services, be careful. I think most of the goods which I mentioned you may not be dealing, but services, keep your eyes open. The classic thing is I would be receiving services from goods transport agency. Goods transport agency is a person, like a person who will connect you for moving your goods, say a transporter, and he'll charge only for transporting the goods as an agency, right? So if I'm a factory and if I'm a person registered under GST, or if I'm a company or a partnership firm or a LLP, if a goods transport agency is supplying the services, the recipient is liable to pay service tax under reverse charge mechanism. But if a goods transport agency service provider is charging you GST, then you are not required to pay tax. So generally, when they issue a invoice to you, check whether they have charged GST. If they have charged GST, then you need not pay under reverse charge mechanism. If he has not charged that, you will have to pay tax. Generally, what happens is when they upload their GSTR1, they will make a mention that the recipient is liable to pay under reverse charge mechanism. Even their invoice will mention that the recipient is liable to pay under reverse charge mechanism. So check the invoice, and also your GSTR1 they upload. It comes to into your GSTR2B also. It will say that this particular transaction is liable to tax under reverse charge mechanism. You have to pay. If you miss paying that, and if the department comes for an audit or there is a notice issued to you, and if they find out that you have not paid the tax, you will be liable to pay tax with interest and consequential penalty. Services, when you receive from an advocate, like you would approach for certain legal consultancy from an advocate, they will not charge you GST. If you are a business and you are located in India and registered under GST, you are required to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. So be careful when you're receiving any invoices from an advocate, you are liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Similarly, sponsorship services and services by a director, the director will not be liable to pay tax. The company is liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Similarly, security services, any person other than body corporate, like a private limited company, if he is providing, he will do under forward charge, otherwise it is under reverse charge mechanism. Then on services by way of renting of residential dwelling and immovable property, I'll just show you one quick snapshot. See the various combination. Renting of residential property. Supplier is registered person, recipient is registered person, proprietor, say a proprietor, he is using that for residential purposes, then it is not liable to GST. If he is a registered person and registered person other than for residential purposes, it is liable under reverse charge mechanism. Registered person renting of residential property to an unregistered person, exempt. See, if you see this various combination, it gets very complicated. So you have to be very careful. Anyway, this PPT will be shared to you all. You can have a look at this and determine whether it is liable to tax under reverse charge mechanism or not. These complications will lead to determining the applicability of RCM or forward charge. You have to keep your eyes open, because uh, uh, I can't say that I didn't know that I'm not liable to tax and not I have not paid tax. You can't take that excuse and say I missed that. And if there is a demand on tax liability determined by the tax offices, you will be liable to pay with interest and penalty. So you have to be very careful in this aspect. Another aspect which I would like to cover is be careful on these compliances, right? Invoice, when I have to raise, when I supply goods, when I have to raise invoice when I supply services. For goods, immediately where it involves movement of goods, the goods should accompany invoice. In case other than movement of goods, say if I deliver the generator in my factory itself and I move out of that factory permanently, it is called as a deemed delivery. So it is to be raised immediately upon this deemed delivery for goods. And in case of services, within 30 days of supply of services, but generally service providers will issue immediately. Uh, so these compliances you have to take care for supply of goods, ensure that the appropriate documentation is there, because during the movement of goods, if the invoice is not there, the and for what you say tax intelligence, if you see Subega or uh, enforcement officers who move around the city, if they find that your goods which are moving do not have the documents, they will levy penalty, which is a huge one. So be careful. And apart from a regular invoice, currently, if your aggregate turnover is more than 5 crores, you have to issue a e-invoice. What is e-invoice? I'll just cover. E-invoice is not a invoice which is a e-generated thing. It is a invoice reference which I have to generate from the GST portal, and then I have to put it in my invoice. It is not an e-invoice number. It is a unique number which has to be generated by putting the details in the GST portal. Upon putting that details, it will give you a particular, see this particular combination which you have done. This has to be embedded in the invoice along with the QR code. So if you're liable for issuing a e-invoice, which is colloquially called as e-invoice, you ensure that the invoice has been you have generated this particular IRN, and you have embedded that on the invoice, because this is critical. If you are liable for generation of IRN, and if the goods, if the invoice do not have this particular IRN, and if your goods are caught during movement, they will levy penalty. So be careful on this also. What is that aggregate turnover? You have to determine based on that 5 crore which I have mentioned. So aggregate turnover, what to be included? Inclusion for 5 crore turnover is taxable outward supply, including stock transfer. What is stock transfer? When I move the goods from one state to other state, generally that was called a stock transfer, that is liable to GST. Even that turnover you have to determine. If you move the goods for job work from your place to a job worker and getting it back, that also has to be included. Exempt supplies of goods or services also will have to be considered for your determining the turnover limit of 5 crore, and even export supplies will have to be considered. So you have to be very careful to determine the 5 crore turnover for your e-invoice. Registration is a different aspect. Once you're registered, then whether e-invoice is applicable, you will have to see this into each turnover details and determine whether you are liable to issue e-invoice. And e-invoice which is required to be issued, it is not applicable for B2C, that is business to individuals who are not registered. Then exempted supplies also, and input service distributor, you are not liable to issue e-invoice. Then once I issue a e-invoice, can an amendment be made? No. The only option which is there is you have to cancel that within 24 hours. If you don't cancel that, then that is recorded in the GST portal. Be careful. If any invoice has been e-invoice reference has been generated in the portal and you determine that it is wrong, ensure that you cancel it immediately. Tell your accountants to be careful, because if this cancellation is not done, generally what happens is I raised a wrong invoice and I did a wrong transaction. The general tendency is that I'll immediately raise another IRN and e-invoice. And if I don't cancel this, the portal will determine what all transactions have gone into that. And if I missed this cancellation of this IRN generation, then there will be a mismatch between your GSTR1 and what is there in the portal. Then there will be a notices which is automatically generated by the portal saying there is a mismatch between e-way bills which you have reported vis-a-vis what you have reported in GSTR1 return and what you have reported in 3B. So everything is automated. So be careful on this aspect. And if there is any error which has happened, you can only, if you have not cancelled that, then what you report in GSTR1 that will be monitored by the GST officers. Then e-way bill. This is very important for people who are moving the goods. Any movement of goods or consignment value exceeding rupees 50,000. Movement of goods may be on account of supply for reason other than supply. If you are sending that even for job work, you have to raise this e-way bill. Another classic example is if I'm registered in GST, registered in Karnataka, I will be having my uh, premise one in Kormangla and one more I'll have a warehouse say in Malleshwaram. If I'm moving the goods, though it is within the same state, it is for other than supply. If the value is more than 50,000, then I have to accompany that with the e-way bill, though I am not required to raise an invoice. So be careful in such moments. If you don't have an e-way bill and the goods are caught, you will be liable to penalty. Then how do I determine the value of 50,000? It will include the value what you have declared in the invoice, and it includes the tax which you have levied on that particular transaction. Say it is CGST, XGST, and it will exclude the value of exempted supply. My genuine suggestion to all of you is don't get into determine whether I'm liable to raise a e-way bill. Just raise a e-way bill and be done with that. That will only help you to get away with all the unnecessary checking. If you have a e-way bill and if it matches with whatever value of transaction you have done, then the officer will let you go. He'll not get into issuing notices. That would be the best practice, which I suggest. Then e-way bill will have two parts to it, part A and part B. Generally, what happens, part A is immediately generated. Part B is uploaded once the vehicle is known to me. That is when the vehicle transporter informs me the vehicle number. But generally, what happens is certain times we miss to update the part B of e-way bill. If you miss to update the part B of e-way bill, it is not considered as a valid e-way bill at all. E-way bill is considered as valid only after part A and part B is uploaded and submitted in the GST portal. And once it is uploaded, you cannot modify. If goods are, then the only recourse is you have to cancel that within 24 hours. Again, if you don't cancel, the portal will do all the matching. E-way bill mismatch with GSTR1, again mismatch with your GSTR invoice reporting. So there are multiple checks and balances which are available for checking. So be careful. Tell your accountants if there has been an error in an e-way bill. Give them instructions to cancel immediately and raise a fresh e-way bill and make the corrective actions accordingly. And in case where you are moving these goods under transaction with the transporter, you make him what you say liable, saying that in case if you are not adhering to the movement of goods within the timeline and other things, you will be liable for any penalty. Take these precautions. Then this is the validity of a e-way bill. Over-dimensional cargo and non-over other than over-dimensional cargo. This is how the validity. The moment you raise a e-way bill, I'll not get into this crux of it. The moment you raise an e-way bill and get a printed copy, it will show for how many days it is valid. And the validity is determined based on the kilometers. This is done to ensure that there is no diversion of goods and to protect the evasion of tax. And please note that e-invoice and e-way bill are independent of each other. If you raise an invoice, it doesn't mean that you can't, you should not raise a e-way bill. E-way bill, if it is required to be raised, you have to raise an e-way bill. If you are liable for e-invoice, a reference number, you are required to do that. If you don't raise an e-way bill, look at the consequence. Taxable goods, 200% of the tax payable on goods, they levy you penalty. And in case of exempted goods, it will be 2% of the value of goods or 25,000 rupees, whichever is less. And for these minor errors in the e-way bill, there will be no penalty. And a very important aspect which I would like to take uh, your attention to is input tax credit. This is a very critical aspect for every businessman. And if you claim a wrong input tax credit to offset with the output tax, the consequences are really bad. It will be with not only demand of tax, it will be with 18% per annum interest as well as penalty. It will be range up to win 100%. So it should be used in the course or furtherance of business. And what are the conditions for this? Possession of a tax invoice. I earlier mentioned that where the 5 crore threshold limit is there for e-invoice, the person supplier has to raise a e-invoice tax reference. So if your supplier is liable for raising a e-invoice, then you have to check if he has not raised a e-invoice, you have to follow up with him, because a tax invoice, if it is liable for IRN, invoice reference number, and if he has not put that, tomorrow, if you claim a credit which does not have this IRN, then they will disallow the input tax rate. Be very careful. Then, receipt of goods or services or both is one of the conditions for your claiming the input tax credit. Except for goods where there is a bill to ship to mechanism, even if it is billed to one person and shipped to other person, the middle person to whom it is billed, it is deemed as receipt of goods. Then taxes charged on the supply has been paid to the government by the supplier. This puts a very onerous task on the recipient. How will I check that whether the supplier has paid the taxes? And this has led to a lot of dispute into the GST mechanism, and now it has reached the Supreme Court. But they are telling that it is the onus of the recipient to check whether the supplier has paid the good taxes on the supplies made. And the next one more task which is there is whether return has been filed by the recipient. So what you can do is in the GST portal, there is a particular tab where you put the detail GST registration of the supplier. It will show you whether he's filed the returns, but whether he's paid the taxes or not, you can't verify, but you can verify at least whether he's been filing his monthly returns and his annual returns. And one more condition is when the supplier uploads his GSTR 1, that should appear in my GSTR 2B also. So this has been a very contentious issue under GST, where people have been where the department has been issuing notices. If you have if it the invoice is not appearing in GSTR 2B, it will be disallowed outright. So it will be a long litigation. So ensure that if the supplier has not uploaded his GSTR 1 and it is not appearing in your GSTR 2B, follow up with the supplier, and only once it appears in your GSTR 2B, you claim the credits. If the goods are received in installments, then you can claim the credit only when the last installment is received. And one more thing is, if you have not paid the supplier for the invoices which he has raised to you within 180 days, then you are required to reverse the input tax credit, and you are required to pay interest from the day you had claimed the input tax credit till the date of reversal. So it is in the interest that you pay the supplier within 180 days. If you don't pay, then you are required to pay reverse that input tax credit, and you are eligible to reclaim the credit once you make the payment. So be careful on this aspect. And if there are any capital goods which you have procured, capital goods for GST means what you have capitalized in the books of accounts, you should not claim depreciation on the input tax credit under the Income Tax Act. So you should ensure that you have capitalized only the base or taxable value and claim depreciation only on that. You should have not claimed depreciation on the GST component. And one more important aspect, if invoices have been issued to you during a financial year, you can't claim input tax credit beyond 30th November of the subsequent financial year. But as a precaution, you ensure that you claim in your GSTR 3B return of October 27 for the financial year 26-27, which is the current year. So if you don't claim the credit within the time limits, then you are liable for, you are not eligible for the credit, then that will be disallowed during the assessment year. Here, that 27 is only for the financial year 20, 26, 27, which I'm mentioning. But for respective years, you will have to see what is applicable. And earlier it was not earlier it was 25. Sorry. Earlier it was September. So be careful on these particular claim of credits, because if you don't claim within the time limits, your credits are gone. Be careful. Then only which is eligible for business purposes, only it is eligible. There are certain credits which you are not entitled to take. I'll just make a quick reference of that. Food and beverages. You will tell that I have to give my employees food and beverages. Why should I not be eligible to take credit? There is a specific restriction that food and beverages you can't claim credit unless you are involved in supply of food and beverages. The only relaxation is that if you are required to provide the food and it is obligatory under any of the act, under any other law, you can take credit of that. A classic example is if you are required to give food to the employees under the Factories Act, then you are eligible to take credit. Otherwise, you are not eligible to take the credit. Then life insurance and health insurance is also you are not entitled to take credit. But if it is required under the specific laws, say for example under Factories Act, then you are entitled to take credit. Otherwise, you are not entitled to. An insurance company where they do this co-insurance business, they'll be entitled. But as a general business person, if I'm a say trading of goods, if I take insurance for my employees, I'm not entitled to take credit. Membership of club, health club, these are not eligible for credit. You may say that yeah, this is necessary for my business purposes. This helps me with interacting with people across and developing business. You may have all this saying that it is in the course or furtherance of business, but the GST Act specifically restricts. Now, if there is any works contract service, say construction of a immobile property, I am not entitled to take credit, whether it is in the form of works contract or if I do it through on my own. But if that particular works contract services is for plant and machinery, say for laying the foundation of the plant and machinery, I am entitled to take credit. Otherwise, it is not you are not entitled to take credit. Many were disputing on this aspect. There was there was one judgment of Safari Retreat where Odisha High Court had said that you are entitled to credit, but the government challenged this, and that had gone into Supreme Court. Supreme Court gave a judgment. You determine whether it is for plant and machinery or not, and you will be entitled to credit. The moment this judgment came, again they made a retrospective amendment saying that there was a mention of plant and machinery or plant or machinery. Two words were there in the GST Act. The moment this judgment came, there was an amendment to the GST Act saying that the plant or machinery should be read as plant and machinery, and it is retrospective. So such disputes are there. So if you don't want to get into litigation, anything related to construction of immobile property, please don't take credit. Otherwise, you'll take the credit, say in the financial year 26-27. They will come for audit after 3 years and they will disallow all these credits. You will be required to pay that with interest of 18% and penalty, which will lead up to 100%. So be careful on that. Ineligible credit of goods or services for personal consumption, you are not entitled to credit. What is personal consumption is a matter of debate. But under Companies Act, you are not entitled to book any expenditure for personal consumption. That is a easy shot. But if it is a proprietorship and other things, you will have to determine what is meant for personal consumption. Don't take any input tax credit. And if any goods are lost, destroyed, written off, and even if you give samples, if you have claimed input tax credit of that, you have to reverse the input tax credit subsequently if you have claimed and utilized that. And how you have to utilize the input tax credit? what happens is if it is an interstate supply, it is liable to integrated goods and service tax. If it is a transaction within the state, it is liable to central goods and service tax and state goods and service tax. So what happens is if it is a input tax credit of IGST, you can utilize it. Is IGST is a very beautiful credit which you can utilize for offset for IGST, CGST, and SGST. But when it comes to CGST, CGST can be used for CGST, IGST, and CGST only, but you can't utilize that for SGST. And if it is a SGST credit, you can utilize that for SGST and IGST, but you can't utilize that for IGST. So these mechanism when you're filing your return, be careful while utilizing your credits. Some of the good practices, uh, sir, I'll take another 5 minutes, then you can take up for questions.
Okay, sir. No issues.
Many of us don't display our name, GST, and addresses in the premises, right? Be careful. If you are not doing this, there's a penalty straight 50,000. So prominent place of a premises, ensure that you have displayed the name GSTN. And as a practice, please avoid giving your home addresses as the registration premises, because the moment you give your home as the premise for registration, then you're calling for the what is a GST officers have the power to come and inspect the premises, so they can land up even in your home. So avoid having that. So preferably have a premise which is not there. Then you'll tell, sir, for my small businesses, I can't afford an office. Okay, you can't afford an office, fine. Then if you give a home address for registration, then be prepared for officers coming and visiting your home also. Then this is my classic issue which I come across with various dealers. Do you know your user ID password? Sir, ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ sir. ಎಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಅಕೌಂಟೆಂಟಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತು. Correct? This is a very dangerous thing. What happens is if any user ID password if you don't have and you're not checking your portal, nowadays in GST the notices are issued in the GST portal itself into your registration portal. If you're not checking your GST login, then if you're mischecking any notices, and if you don't reply to the notice within the time prescribed, they will pass an ex parte order. Later on, if you don't pay if you have not seen that and order is passed, and if you have not seen that there is a huge tax demand, they'll come and attach your bank accounts. So this is the most dangerous thing to have. Your accountant might be having a user ID password, but it doesn't take away the responsibility of the taxpayer to check whether the notices have been issued and whether you have failed to reply the notice. It is not their headache. The GST Act provides for issuing notices, e-notices in the portal. How to fight that because you have not checked the notice is a different legal battle that will take care, but that comes at a cost, right? If you don't see and don't reply to the notice, and if you have to go all the way litigating, the cost of consultants and advocates is not very small. You will have to bear a good amount of fees for that, right? So check the GST portal, log in every day. You may miss to drink your cup of tea or coffee in a day, but don't miss checking the portal morning once you go into your business premises, and before you lock your business premises in the day, check this. And as a classic good practice is reconcile your e-way bill, what is there in the data in the e-way bill portal with the GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B on a monthly basis. Then e-way bill with the inward supplies with GSTR 2B and 3B on a monthly basis, and ensure that you file your returns within the due date. If you are not filing your returns, the portal is going on to keep a check. If you don't file your returns, then it will not allow you to file your what issue your e-way bills also. So ensure that all these healthy practices are kept, and if you're filing your returns on a regular basis and paying taxes, the lesser are the chances of you getting inspected. It doesn't mean that if you're filing your returns, you're not being inspected. GST portal has its own mechanism to check and flag off to officers based on certain parameters, and based on that also GST officers can come and visit your premises. It is not that if I'm tax compliant, GST people will not visit. They will visit. They have the powers. Don't worry. If you have been compliant and filing your returns and paying your taxes, they will come provide all the details and books of accounts. If there is nothing to hide, they will close the case. If there is something which has been done, or if you have missed the taxes, they will issue a notice and you may end up paying taxes. So, as a matter of fact, for today's discussion, I just try to give an overview of what all you can do. I will be sharing this PPT as a reference to all of you. You can have a look at it, but each aspect has its own dimensions and requires an in-depth analysis, which uh, what you say, a practitioner or a accountant will require. But as a business person, what you have to keep your eyes open. I just try to cover those things in a short span of 1 hour. uh, Sir, now I will stop here because already 1 hour is over, and people might be having to go and have their dinner also. And I think there are some questions in the chat also.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I,
So you have covered the major portions of that. There are questions, one or two questions, I think there. So first we will take those questions. Then afterwards, one or two people, if they want to ask any questions, they can unmute and go for their question, right? The first one.
Go ahead, or there are some other questions.
Yeah, there is a.
Go ahead, Raj. Nandu one question will take, but you please.
Yeah, so I think first we'll cover that. What is the questions asked in this? Okay, I
there
think
are no
one
questions.
from.
Anybody can ask any questions if it's there.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay, there
Siddesh,
was.
my one question.
Yeah.
If we are taking some support of advocates
Mm-hmm.
and we have paid them some fees,
Yes.
we are liable to pay the tax?
Are you taking that advice where as a business person registered under GST?
See, it is on a personal basis, but if I'm a GST payer,
No, is it related to your business related
no,
thing?
it's a personal thing.
If it is related to your property and other things where you want to buy property and other things as
Yeah.
an individual capacity, no.
Okay.
But if it is a advice, say you got a notice, you got an order under GST, and he's going to fight the case for you, he will raise an invoice for you. Or you may ask an expert opinion from an advocate, checking that whether the particular goods or services is liable to tax. He will give an
Okay.
expert opinion. In that
Mhm.
case, you are liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism.
Okay. Thanks. And is there a GST applicable on life-saving drugs?
The rates of tax are different. Some are at 5% and some are at 18%. So classification bulk drugs is there. So of late, if you see that when they made this amendment in 2025, some of the drugs they tried to bring it at a lower rate so that it is affordable. But even on imports, they are liable to IGST and basic customs duty also. So if you see what happens is the moment the goods are say you say it is not liable to GST, what will happen is the raw material will be liable to tax. So when I use that for manufacturer, the assuming the life-saving drugs is not taxable, then what raw materials I procured, that I'll add to my tax. I'll add to my sale price. So it will only increase the cost of that life-saving drugs. So only by exempting the drugs, you're not going to get any relaxation. The whole chain of activity of raw materials end to end should be exempt. Then you'll get a reduction in price of the medicines.
Okay, thanks.
Siddesh, this is Gurunath here.
Yeah.
So this where I can find out the HSN codes?
It is in notification. HSN codes. What happens is, for I gave the reference, right, for goods 9 of 2020. If you go to GST portal, what happens is the updation in GST portal, you'll have all the notifications there, but it will not be updated on a real time basis.
Okay.
So there are notifications. If you go to GST portal, you go to cbic.gov.in. There you have called GST section also, right? There you click there, then you will find notification, and notifications are so many that you will be lost, because that will not give you a real update. So what we do is, on a daily basis, we keep studying the GST Act and we keep seeing the notifications. And even that also keeps us in difficult. We have various, what you say, subscription to this GST service providers, right? Where they update all the notifications. So we search based on that also. So there are a
Okay.
lot of service providers for search of not only notification, there are a lot of judgments which come on a daily basis, that also gets updated there. But
Oh,
I suggest that just don't go by that what is there, because you'll have to see end-to-end notifications which keep updating.
okay. And one more thing, that e-way bill, whenever we generate, right?
Uh-huh.
So we will put some figure in the, because when we send any material
Goods.
from one corner of the city to another corner of the city for some job work.
Uh-huh.
So in that case, like if we mention something in the product actually,
Okay.
and
See what?
whether that person who catches us on the way in
Mhm.
the case, how does he know that what is the number we have put for the cost of that material, right, is correct?
No, whatever you put on that value, he can't, it can be put, you put whatever value. See, especially for job work, if you're sending, you might be sending without payment of tax, right? Because you have an exemption, right? When you send,
Yeah,
when you send for job work within the state to a job worker, you will send it under a delivery challan and e-way bill, right?
correct. Yeah,
And
DC will
again,
be.
he will send it back to you under a delivery challan and e-way bill, and he'll charge you for services for which he'll charge tax. Now, whatever value you put, he can't question. In fact, what has happened in some cases, the officers went on to levy penalty, saying that what value you put in the invoice is incorrect. So people have challenged that, and in the high courts there have been judgments saying that your e-way bill of the, what you say, this check post officers, which is classically called, or the mobile
Correct,
officers, right? They
correct.
can't question you on the value. It is the assessing officer who can check. These mobile scouts can't question on the value. You have a
Okay,
good case to fight.
okay,
They can't
okay,
challenge you on the valuation. It is only in assessments. If you have a valid e-way bill, they can't question you on a classification also. They can't question you on a valuation also. But it's a long fight. So what will happen is, you can't wait for that, right? Because goods have to reach the premise. So what
yes, yeah,
happens is, they pay the penalty. You pay the penalty under protest.
okay.
You pay the penalty under protest, then you file an appeal.
Oh, okay,
It is
okay,
a appeal process. If the value is really high and it's a
okay,
big litigation, you will have to fight out your case.
okay, fine. Thank you, and a very interesting session actually.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? I am okay to
Yeah,
take.
we can take maximum 1 or 2 now in the interest of time.
Hey,
Arun,
Raj, ತಡಿಪ ಎರಡದ ನನ್ನ ಕ್ವಶನ್
yeah,
Arun sir, here sir.
ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು Siddeshwar, ನೀವು ರಿಯಲಿ GST guru ಅಂತ ಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡಿದಿರಿ. We have never
Yeah,
attended your session, but this
Yes.
is a very intense, deep, thought-provoking session. Thank you so much. Part time ತಗೊಂಡ್ರಿ, full interest ತಗೊಂಡ್ರಿ. There was no pause. Information consume ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೂ we should have the ability, right? So it was good. But ನನಗೆ I am not from a GST registration point of view. I am part of a software team which develops expense and reimbursement management. Very, very critical in this era. Okay. So, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು scenario ಇದಾವೆ. ಎರಡು scenario I need your help here, if you can guide me. ಈಗ ಒಂದು, let's say you're partner with one cab agency, Ola or Uber, something like that. And it generates thousands of bills every month, correct? ಸೊ ನಾವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ದ ಬಿಲ್ ವಿಲ್ ಡೂ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ ಥ್ರೂ ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಚಾರ್ಜಿಂಗ್ ಮೆಕ್ಯಾನಿಸಮ್ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಅಕೌಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಟೀಮ್ ಇಸ್ ಡೂಯಿಂಗ್ ಹಿಯರ್ will not capture the tax from the bills and will manage it directly once in a month. What is that happening behind the screen? So that as a IT person, I should know that so that I give the right logic in my solution. This is the first question, sir.
No, if I wanted to understand this Ola invoices which are coming to you, which you have to pay on reverse charge
Let's say
mechanism,
there are
right?
1,000 employees there ಅಂತ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. 1,000 employees ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದೊಂದು ರೈಡ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾರೆ ನಾವು there will be at least 3,000 bills.
ಅವ್ರು ರಿಯಂಬರ್ಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ.
ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದು ಹೆಂಗ್ ಮಾಡೇವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಯೂಸ್ ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಊಬರ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಸೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ದ ಬಿಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಕಮ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ ಅಪ್ರೂವಲ್, ಇಟ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ರೀಚಸ್ ಫೈನಾನ್ಸ್ ಟೀಮ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಹಾಕಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ, GST ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಡ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರ, ಹಾಕಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇವರು
But
ರಿವರ್ಸ್.
how are you booking that Ola cab? Is the individual booking or is the company booking?
It's individual is booking and then bill comes to company. Our official Uber app ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ
Oh,
ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ.
it is company linked
ಬಿಲ್ ಟು
app.
ಕಂಪನಿ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ.
Sure. So ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ,
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಅವ್ರೆಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪರ್ಟ್ ಅದಾರೆ.
ಇಲ್ಲ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮಂತ್ ಆನ್ ಮಂತ್ ಇದು ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಟು ಈಗ ಡೈಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸೇ ಫಾರ್ ದ ಮಂತ್ ಆಫ್ July you had some 100 invoices, right? It will come into the details. ಅದೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, the liability to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism will fall, say July ಇದು it will be due for payment in August 20th 3B ಅಂತ ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರು. But only question ಏನೈತೆ, how that software is getting captured and all, I think they would have taken certain, there are many, what you say, tax service softwares which are there, which it will download and populate it automatically. There are many software service providers. If they are using that, I think should not be a problem. But only thing, one alert I would like to tell you is, you should pay the reverse charge mechanism by cash ledger.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ ಯಾರು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು. We are talking here. Okay.
What happens is, reverse charge
by
mechanism
cash
with ಏನ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಪೇ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, that has to be paid through electronic cash ledger. You should not pay it through credit ledger.
Okay. Understood.
If you pay it with credit ledger, there is a specific provision saying that for reverse charge mechanism, pay it only through cash ledger.
Okay. Sure. So this they have to take care of on the payment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Import of service ಆಯ್ತು, reverse charge mechanism ಆಯ್ತು.
Okay. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇದೆ ರೀ. ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಟೆಲ್ ಮಿ ಹೌ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ನಮಗೆ ಈಗ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ಫುಡ್ ಬಿಲ್ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ. ಓಕೆ, ದೇರ್ ಬಿ three types of food bills. ಒಂದು, they go to standard hotel and he will give tax versus actual food bill. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಏನ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಬಿಫೋರ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ದೆನ್ ದಟ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ. ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ಬಿಲ್. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಬಿಲ್ ಫುಡ್ ವಿತ್ ಆಲ್ಕೋಹಾಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. This alcohol.
No, you are what service provider?
We are software. We are
so
normal company, manufacturing company. That's it.
So you have received the invoice of the restaurant, right?
Correct.
Okay. So as I mentioned, food bill and food related things, you are not eligible to input tax credit straight.
Okay. No. But what should I do as an accountant person?
You should expense that.
Why they try to capture it separately? Is there any specific objective?
In the books of accounts? Why they are doing that is, see what has happened as the GST got evolved. Initially, say you are a manufacturing company, if you are not eligible to input tax credit, what companies were doing is they are not showing that in the return. I am not eligible only. Why should I show that in reverse?
Okay.
It is a headache anta ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. But what happened with the government is, see, what happens is, water taxes are charged. There might be CGST, SGST or IGST. If I don't show that in the return and reverse it, the taxes were not getting settled between the central government and the state government. So a lot of this input tax credit which is moving in the portal was sitting in the GST portal. So it started becoming a major hassle for the center and state government to settle this taxes between both the governments. So what they made now is, even if you're not eligible for credit in the GST or 3B,
Hmm.
There are tables. It mentions that in table, particular table, you have to show that as claim that credit. Then
Okay.
that is called a 4A5, and there are two tables in that. Claim that as a credit.
Huh.
Then you have to do this permanent reversal in the credit. So what government has to do, they are making us to do
Okay. 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 There
only
is a
for claim and
responsibility on each
reversal,
company. Okay. Okay.
and that is required, and what they are doing is right.
Okay. Okay. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಲಾಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಸರ್. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಇನ್ ಟಚ್ ವಿತ್ ಯು.
Sure.
ಈಗ ಫುಡ್ ಬಿಲ್ ಆಲ್ಕೋಹಾಲ್ ಬಿಲ್ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಆಫ್ ದ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹಾಕಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಂಡ್ ಇನ್ ಬೇಸ್ಡ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಇಫ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಬಲ್ ವಿಲ್ ಡಿಡಕ್ಟ್ ದಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ವಿಲ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಡ್. ಇದು ನಿನ್ನ ಗ್ರೇಡಿವ್ ನಿನ್ನ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಬರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಓನ್ಲಿ ಇಫ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕ್ಲೈಂಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ವೆನ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟಿಂಗ್ ದ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್, ಶುಡ್ ವಿ ಡೂ ಟೇಕ್ ಎನಿ ಪ್ರಿಕಾಷನ್ ಆನ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಫುಡ್ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಆಲ್ಕೋಹಾಲ್?
ಆಲ್ಕೋಹಾಲ್ ಮೇಲೆ GST ಇರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಆಸ್ ಐ ಮೆನ್ಷನ್ ಇನ್ ದ
ಅವಾಗ
ಬಿಗಿನಿಂಗ್.
ಹೆಂಗ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕ್ರಿ ಅವ್ರ
ಇಲ್ಲ,
ಅಕೌಂಟ್ಸ್?
ಇನ್ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ
ಹಾ
GST ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಶೋನ್ ಸಪರೇಟ್ಲಿ.
ಹೌದು.
ಸೊ ದಟ್
ಅದ್ರಾಗ
GST ಇಸ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಫಾರ್ ಫುಡ್.
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೋಟೆಲ್ ನಾವ್ ಎರಡಕ್ಕೂ ಹಾಕಿ GST ಜಡ್ದಿದ್ನ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಅವ್ನು ಮಾಡಕ್
No,
ಆಗಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
no, no, ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
ಬರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
Because he
ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ
can't
sure
collect GST on alcohol for human consumption.
ಅದು
ಸಪರೇಟ್
ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಲ್
ಹಾ,
ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ.
ನೀವು ಇನ್ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಕೈತಿ ಸರ್.
ಬಿಲ್ ಸಪರೇಟ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ, ಬಿಲ್ ಸಪರೇಟ್.
ಹೌದಾ? ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ
And generally
ಜನರಲಿ
they
ಅವ್ರ
will give invoice for alcohol separately and food separately,
Yeah.
even if they include in the same
ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ
invoice.
ಕೊಡಂಗಿಲ್ರಿ ಅವ್ರು, ಅದಕ್ಕಂದೆ.
But GST alcohol ಮೇಲೆ ಇರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಇರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ಶೋರ್ ಶೋರ್. This point was not clear. Now I'm clear. I will take
Okay.
care in the software. Got it, got it. Thank you so much, sir. ಇನ್ನದಾವ
Thank
ಆಮೇಲೆ ಸಪರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾತಾಡೋಣ.
Sure, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
ಸರ್ ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಸರ್.
ನಾ
ಸರ್
ಹೇಳಿ
ಒಂದು ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್. ಇಫ್ ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಡಕ್ಟ್ ನ ಬೈ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕಂಪ್ನಿಗೆ ಸರ್,
ಹಾ
ಬಲ್ಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು 10 ಪ್ರಾಡಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ನ ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಇಫ್ ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ಡಿಮ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವಾಗೆ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ಈ ಮಂತ್ ತಗೊಂಡಿದೀವಿ, ಇದೇ ಮಂತ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ.
ಹ್ಮ್
ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮಂತ್ GST-R1 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸೇಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ, ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ 2B ಒಳಗೆ ಅವ್ರು ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡಿರಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಈಗ ಇದೇ ಮಂತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದಿರ, GST-R1 ಜುಲೈ ಮಂತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಸ್ಟ್ ಡ್ಯೂ ಡೇಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದಿರಿ, ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾ?
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ. ಬಟ್ GST-R ನಿಮ್ ಸಪ್ಲೈಯರ್ಸ್ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ವಾ?
ಹಾ ಸರ್, ಸಪ್ಲೈಯರ್ಸ್
ನಿಮ್
ಅವರು ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ.
ಸಪ್ಲೈಯರ್ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ತಗೊಳಕ್ ಬರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
ಸೊ ನೀವು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಇನ್ಸಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆನ್ ದಟ್ ಸಪ್ಲೈಯರ್ ಟು ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ದ GST-R1.
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
GST-R1 ಡ್ಯೂ ಡೇಟು 11th.
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
ನಿಮ್ಗೆ 2B
20th.
ಬರುವುದು 17th.
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
ಸೊ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಡೂ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ವಿತ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಹೂ ಆರ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೈಂಟ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಲಾ. It is a
ಹಾ
very ideal situation which I may be telling,
ಹ್ಮ್.
but you have to do business with the vendors who are compliant with law. If they are not compliant with law, you stop business.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
Otherwise, ನೀವು ಕೈಯಿಂದ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಕಟ್ಟಬೇಕು.
ಹಾ ಸರ್. ಹಾ ಸರ್.
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ಆಕೈತಿ, ಈ ಮಂತ್ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮಂತ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮಂತ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್
ಹಾ
ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮಂತ್ ಆಗ ಬಂದು ಕುಂತ್ರೆ ಏನು ಉಪಯೋಗ? ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್
ಹಾ
ಅ ಲಾಸ್.
ಹಾ ಸರ್.
You tell strictly that you have to upload within the timeline, otherwise we'll stop business with you. They'll fall in line.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I think in the interest of the time, let us conclude because your time is precious. Thank you all for attending. Siddeshwar sir, you have covered starting with the basics of GST and the background ಏನಿತ್ತು ಅದನ್ನು ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ. And what is covered under GST and what's not covered ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಭಾಳ ಚಲೋ ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬಾರ್ಟರ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ it was a very important point you have mentioned that, right? And ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮೆಕ್ಯಾನಿಸಮು ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಏಜೆನ್ಸಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ದೆನ್ ಅಡ್ವೊಕೇಟ್ಸ್ ಹೆಂಗಿದೆ, ಎನಿ ಜನರಲ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಭಾಳ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ವಿತ್ ಚಾರ್ಟ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೇನ್ಡ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನಿಮ್ದೇನು PPT ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಅದನ್ನು ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅದು ನಾವು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನೀವು ನಮಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟರೆ ದೆನ್ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಶೇರ್ ಇಟ್ ಟು ಅದರ್ಸ್, ರೈಟ್ ಸರ್? ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ರೆಂಟಿಂಗ್ ದ ರೆಸಿಡೆನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಪ್ರಾಪರ್ಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಚಾರ್ಟ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ರಿ ಇದರೆಲ್ಲ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ವಾಯ್ಸು ಮತ್ತು ಇ ವಿ ಬಿಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಟೇಕ್ ಅವೇ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಯುವರ್ ಸೆಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಹೆಲ್ದಿ ಗುಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಸ್ ಟು ಬಿ ಫಾಲೋಡ್ just to avoid the things. ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗಿ ದೆನ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಫೈಟ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಕೇಸ್ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ವಾಟ್ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಸ್ ಆರ್ ಹೆಲ್ದಿ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಭಾಳ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ. ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಓವರ್ ಆಲ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಆರ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಸರ್ವಿಸ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇಫ್ ದೇ ಜಸ್ಟ್ give a attention to these things and definitely they can avoid the future hassles ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. So in the available time, sir, you have covered majority of the points. A big thank you from all of us in the team UKSL. And it was a very good session, sir, and it was good attended by many. And we have recorded
Popular
this.
session with highest attendance.
Yeah, one of the session
Yes.
with highest attendance, and we have recorded it, and we will first we'll check with you. You know, you just glance through that, sir, and then later we will put into our UKSL YouTube channel. So that people who are we were unable to attend the session today, that one the people can go through that at the leisure time, sir. Again, once again, a big thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So
Thanks,
this is a
Satish.
overview. It's not a detailed expert thing, so you have to take precautions of whatever you're doing because everything has its own issues. So this was just a touch and go of it. So just don't go by the PPT and other things because PPT is just a reference type for the session to make it more interactive. So be careful of the act. Though it is a very good act, if you don't comply, it might backfire in a very bad manner. So be careful of that.
How, sir?
And thank you for UKSL to give me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you, sir.
for
Thank you very
patient
much.
hearing. And the way you summarize, sir, I got confidence that every slide you have seen through that, and you made a summary so well. That it gives me a confidence that the session was listened very carefully, and also questions which came across gives me that encouragement that it was well
Correct.
received, sir.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks for your time, and I know you have covered things as you mentioned. Yes, you just you have given to us, and any specific things so that people will definitely after going through the video. I think if any queries are there, the people can approach you. And again, once again, sir, thank you very much. It was a very wonderful session, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Happy weekend. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
I log off, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.